You are watching Channel NewsAsia. Understand Asia.
John is also a board member of Choson Exchange, an international outfit that engages North Korea on the economic front. Having visited the country several times, John is optimistic Pyongyang will continue to open up, albeit cautiously, to bring prosperity to its population.
Back in the 90s, there was a lot of relief aid, kind of money coming into the country. That's dried up for the most part. So in order to get funding into the country, they need to attract business. They need to attract investment.
To that end, Pyongyang seems eager to get international humanitarian organizations back into the country. Last year, Singapore's Mercy Relief was in Chone County, some 400 kilometers from Pyongyang. They were invited to provide assistance to the communities affected by floods and landslides.
Along the way, we saw many things. We saw pockets of poverty, but to us, we've seen these conditions in some of the Indo-China countries. We've seen some of these conditions in the South Asian countries, and but it's not as if they are much way below those that we have seen before. We don't see people dying of hunger.
However, the United Nations has raised concerns over the deteriorating humanitarian conditions in the DPRK and called on the international community to extend their help. Observers say the combination of economic and humanitarian needs, coupled with a young leader who was educated for some time in Switzerland, could all combine to create an opportunity for even greater openness. But even if that openness materializes, it would still be premature to talk of peace and unification on the Korean peninsula.
You can catch the Ballad of North and South tonight at 8:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time.
난 지금도 애국가를 부르잖아요. 애국가를 부르면 눈물이 나. 애국가를 부르면.
War memorials play an important role in bolstering a people's sense of collective history. In the DPRK, it means even more. To mark the 60th anniversary of the Korean Armistice Agreement, the country's leader Kim Jong-un officiated at the unveiling of what is believed to be North Korea's biggest war memorial. The remains of more than 800 North Korean soldiers were relocated here. They are considered heroes, not just fallen soldiers. For Kim Jong-un, anniversaries like these are important building blocks to strengthen his leadership of the country, a role he assumed less than 2 years ago upon the death of his father, Kim Jong-il. He is making sure that the DPRK's past continues to resonate into the future.
위대한 수령님만 계시면 이긴다는 한 마음으로 우리는 싸워서 승리하고 말았습니다. 진짜 미제국주의를 우두머리로 하는 15개 추종 국가를 물리치고 승리했다는 그 자부심은 오늘도 내일도 영원히 우리 가슴에 간직되어 있을 것입니다.
Among the veterans present at the commemoration was the enemy. American Thomas Hudner returned 62 years after he crash-landed his aircraft in North Korea during the war.
Feelings that I didn't anticipate. It's an emotional experience all along. And to think that we were fighting a very bitter war with North Korea over 60 years ago, it's gratifying to see what the attitude is of all the people. We've been received with nothing but warmth and understanding.
Hudner was in North Korea to seek closure.
Tom Hudner then purposely risked his life and crash landed his aircraft alongside of Jesse's so he could attempt a one-man rescue to pull his friend from the wrecked aircraft. And he's never forgotten his promise that day that he made on the mountainside. Before he left Jesse, before he was taken away by helicopter, Tom said, "We'll come back for you." Tom conveyed Jesse's last words to Jesse's widow, Daisy Brown, and he's never forgotten his promise that day that he made on the mountainside. Before he left Jesse, before he was taken away by helicopter, Tom said, "We'll come back for you."
Hundreds of war veterans also returned to the other side of the Korean peninsula to mark the 60th anniversary of the armistice. They were part of the multinational force that fought alongside South Korea in the three-year battle. For most of them, they returned to a country starkly different from the one they left 6 decades ago.
When I was in Seoul the first time, it was bombed and it was just a muddy area. No buildings, just small huts.
What I visualized in my mind was, almost like a desert.
But the war never really ended. The armistice signed in 1953 was a truce, not a peace agreement. Hostilities between the two Koreas, who were one for thousands of years, continue till this day.
There is no true peace on the Korean peninsula. And because of all that, it is unfinished. Still, there is a division between two Korea, North and South. We didn't march into the North Korean territory. We didn't achieve our unification, or we didn't end this North Korean regime, which is very brutal even today. So for us, there's not much to celebrate about this.
It's a different story in the north. 27th July, the day the armistice was signed, is regarded as their victory day. It was marked with a series of celebrations, the centerpiece being the military parade in the heart of Pyongyang. Tens of thousands of North Koreans took part. To outsiders, this was the military's show of force, unity, and loyalty to their leader. But in North Korea, the military exists not just to defend the country. It is considered the central nervous system of the government, providing legitimacy to all its institutions. North Korea calls it Songun, military-first politics. During war anniversaries, national education, or indoctrination, as some prefer to call it, takes place with greater fervor. One of the compulsory places to visit, particularly for students, is the National Mausoleum, where the bodies of Kim Il-sung and his son Kim Jong-il are preserved.
수리줄 전승을 맞으면서 학생들 가슴속에 위대한 대한스님의 전승 목적을 심어주기 위해서 또 대한스님의 태양상 학생들의 가슴속에 심어주기 위해서 맞습니다.
It's the perfect time to showcase the Kim Song-ilya and Kim Jong-ilya, named after the country's revered leaders.
The color of the flower, Kim Jong-ilya, the color of the flower is red. This represents the sun, and also the leaves look like hearts. These heart-shaped leaves represent our people's mind to look up to the great leaders forever. So the flower is not only beautiful but also really meaningful.
The guide was word perfect. Her command of English points to the standard of education in North Korea. During big national celebrations like this, university students are recruited as guides and translators for foreign visitors. The huge national propaganda machine gets into full swing, and the international media respond enthusiastically to the invitation, a rare opportunity to step inside one of the most isolated nations on earth. We saw what the regime wanted us to see. Show after show, all tightly scripted, well choreographed, pompous. To North Koreans, it is an honor to perform for their leader. For the leaders, it's a way to rally the population and tighten their grip on the country. For those on the outside looking in, many are left wondering if there is more to this show.
What a day for a daydream. What a day for a daydreaming boy.
Now I'm lost in a daydream, dreaming about my bundle of joy.
The skywards embrace sheer luxury amidst greenery.
It's a big, big world of challenges. Too big for one economy to stand alone. 21 economies from the Asia-Pacific region gather for the second time in Indonesia since 1994 to continue working together toward a stronger connection, greater resilience, for a big, big world of sustainable prosperity for all. Resilient Asia-Pacific, engine of global growth.
7 billion people in the world, and no two fingerprints the same. Everybody's different.
Correct.
You're thinking, if I'm such an individual, why aren't I treated like one?
ANZ's thinking the same way. That's why ANZ can help find a solution that's just right for you.
I can prove that was you.
Madagascar, tomorrow, 9 p.m. on Octo's Animal Night Friday.
From the past to the present, Indonesia has been part of APEC. Moving quickly, looking to the features, growing flowers, progress toward the world economy. Indonesia with 20 countries, including 1,200 CEOs, becoming a resilient Asia-Pacific, engine of global growth.
Very little is known about North Korea to the outside world. Access to foreigners is limited. Even those who are given permission to step inside are usually not allowed to venture beyond the capital Pyongyang. Almost all visitors are assigned guides or minders who are fluent in all major languages. Contact with the local population is not encouraged. But the regime appears to have loosened some of its controls in the last few years. In recent years, humanitarian organizations have been given greater access to the country.
The first mission, we actually brought in a couple of containers, 80,000 packets of ready meals, and also 10 units of our own water filter systems. And we were able to bring these relief supplies out into the fields where, at the affected areas.
In September 2012, Hassan led a humanitarian mission to North Korea after a typhoon caused massive floods and landslides. Thousands were displaced from their homes. Mercy Relief's initial work brought them to several counties just on the outskirts of Pyongyang. It was a precautionary step in an unfamiliar territory, not to venture too far from the capital. In subsequent missions, the Singapore humanitarian team went deeper into the countryside, 400 kilometers from Pyongyang. Chone County was one of the areas worst hit by the typhoon.
That's quite a distance. So even if the DPRK government wants to put up a front for us, it is 300 kilometers of front, both left and side of the road. Along the way, we saw many things. We saw pockets of poverty, but to us, we've seen these conditions in some of the Indo-China countries. We've seen some of these conditions in the South Asian countries, and but it's not as if they are much way below those that we have seen before. We don't see people dying of hunger.
With limited access to information, it's almost impossible to be sure if conditions are worse in other parts of the country. However, the United Nations has raised concerns over the deteriorating humanitarian conditions in the DPRK and called on the international community to extend their help. The pressing need to feed its population and provide them a better life may be one reason the North Korean regime is starting to open up.
Back in the 90s, there was a lot of relief aid, kind of money coming into the country. That's dried up for the most part. So in order to get funding into the country, they need to attract business. They need to attract investment.
As a venture capitalist, John has traveled to many parts of North Korea to study the country's economic potential.
There's a free trade zone in the north, in Rasan, and there have been some announcements of other free trade zones. So I think you're going to get very targeted areas of kind of development, I guess you could call it. And it's kind of similar in a sense to what happened in China. So, a lot of these free trade zones, they're kind of on the borders with China or maybe facing the sea and a little bit further away so they can kind of contain them and see how they work before they start bringing a lot of those concepts back into the capital.
There's still a lot of work needed to bring the country's infrastructure up to speed. But they've started, and not only for the economy. This 4-kilometer-long West Sea barrage was recently completed to mitigate the threats of annual typhoons.
I think the biggest misconception is that, people think that North Korea is very backwards, and in some senses, they are a little bit behind the curve in terms of development. So, sometimes you get people saying, do they live in huts? Do they have cars? Do they, are they like a civilization really, or are they kind of back in the agrarian times? And no, actually, they are reasonably sophisticated. They have, an iPad kind of look-alike now.
As at the middle of 2013, North Korea has more than 2 million mobile phone subscribers. Users are still not able to make international calls, and they can't call foreigners living in the country. But visitors to North Korea are now allowed to bring in their mobile phones, buy a local SIM card and make calls. For an isolated state like North Korea, these are small but significant steps. It's a sign of the leadership's growing confidence, or perhaps they have come to realize the futility of fighting technology that is at its doorstep.
They're proud of North Korea, they're proud of their leaders, but they just want a little bit more for themselves. And you could have a leader like Kim Jong-un who spent some time in the West, he was educated in Switzerland for a few years, and potentially is a little bit more open-minded. Who knows, maybe in 5-10 years, once he's really consolidated, maybe he moves on a path that is kind of requires some change internally.
It would have been unheard of in the past. During the opening of the War Museum in Pyongyang, Kim Jong-un literally came face to face with the public. Maybe it was a security lapse. Or perhaps it's a sign of a different leadership style, one that wants to be seen as being closer to the people. But even if he wins over the people, the military-first policy, or Songun, developed by his father, is still at the core of North Korea's existence. Its nuclear weapons are one of the manifestations of such a policy. It's making South Korea jittery, and the world wonders about the regime's real motivation. Geopolitics and security are complex subjects to many. But perhaps this simple, unrehearsed answer from a North Korean woman could offer some insight into what militarism means to her country.
Weapons does not symbolize only war. They symbolize the guarantee for peace.
From the past to the present, Indonesia has been part of APEC. Moving quickly, looking to the features, growing flowers, progress toward the world economy. Indonesia, with 20 countries, including 1,200 CEOs, becoming a resilient Asia-Pacific engine of global growth.
Bite into better dental health, a health seminar organised by a specialist dental group and Channel NewsAsia. Participants learned about the latest procedures and technologies in dental care through 5 experts who shared information on their fields of expertise.
It gives patients an overview of what dental health is so that they can start to take charge of their health and that they will be able to do something for themselves.
Also, we'd like to remove some of the barriers for accepting dental treatment, especially the fear of the unknown and the fear of pain.
This at least is a good visual reminder, especially seeing those images, to go beyond just seeing the dentist twice a year and brushing your teeth every day.
The doctors are really good at, very articulate, make it very interesting with some humor as well.
I will recommend it to my friends to get better information about oral health and also how to take care of their teeth.
Brought to you by Specialist Dental Group, supported by the following partners, and organised by Channel NewsAsia, Media Corp. We believe in your better well-being.
Born without arms and legs, Nick Vujicic's life has inspired thousands to see their own lives anew. With a sold-out show in Singapore, here's your chance to catch the man who overcame his disability to live a rich and fulfilling life. An Afternoon with Nick Vujicic, recorded at Me at OUE. And No Limits with Nick Vujicic, recorded at the Star Theatre, now on Toggle. Register for a free preview.
This is the view of North Korea from the south. There's not much to see except for the natural landscape. Still, every day, some 2,000 visitors come to this Odu Mountain Unification Observatory, about an hour's drive from the capital, Seoul. Here, visitors are given a short history of the Korean War and the ensuing separation. For South Koreans like Madam Yang Soo-jung, the desire to unite is most palpable here.
구태여 이게 남 얘기 이렇게 그 북한에서 나한테 나쁜 것도 없고 나 또한 이렇게 하는 게 없어서 그렇게 남 얘기처럼 느꼈는데 이제 저희가 이제 사회를 책임져야 되는 나이가 어느 정도 되면서 아이들을 키우면서 아 이거는 통일이 되어야 한다라고 생각이 바뀌었거든요.
Madam Yang is among only a quarter of South Koreans who support the idea of reunification. The figure has dropped in the last 20 years. In the early 1990s, 9 out of 10 said they want the two Koreas together. Then, buoyed by the positive sentiments, one of South Korea's richest men crossed unescorted into North Korea via the truce village of Panmunjom. Born in the socialist north, but having made his fortunes in the capitalist south, the Hyundai Group founder has hoped his daring adventure would spur greater efforts at reunification. But over the years, the idea to unite has lost its appeal. Politics aside, the two Koreas are further apart than ever before.
부패토량한 생활 양식 좋다고 생각 안 합니다. 우리 단일 민족, 우리 조선인민의 그 순결한 그런 생활 방식이 더 좋다고 생각합니다.
They are different in almost every imaginable way. And the divide is more pronounced among the younger generation in South Korea, who have very little ties to the past. School textbooks primarily shape their views about the North.
그냥 북한은 우리하고 적관계고 38선으로 인해서 그 남북 전쟁으로 인해서 우리에게 많은 피해를 입혔으므로 그런 싫다고 생각해요.
Their views on the North are further entrenched when South Korean men serve their 2-year compulsory military service. Once in uniform, the enemy is clear.
Unless really North Korea give up or denuclearize its nuclear weapon, to talking about peace treaty between North and South is practically quite difficult, or if not impossible.
But for Koreans like John, who grew up outside the Korean peninsula, there's a stronger desire to engage and understand the North.
I never met my grandfather, the one who went back up to the North and remarried and had kids. But for me, I still feel like that's, part of who I am, in a way. I mean, not that I hold a North Korean passport or anything like that, but I have family members up there. And so making a positive impact on the country is something that's dear to my heart, even though I've never actually met.
John's engagement with North Korea started with business deals and has begun to bear fruit. And he has carefully nurtured that relationship to influence Pyongyang on the economic front.
I'll be going up to give a lecture at Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. My lecture is in front of the review committee now, but the topic is the Singapore economic system, which my first slide is that Singapore system equals some planned economy and some market mechanism, because I think Singapore has done a very good job at blending the two. And just look at all the communist countries, for instance, who have been on that side of things. They're moving more towards kind of the market mechanism. So I wouldn't be surprised if North Korea eventually follows suit.
Trying to paint an accurate picture of North Korea's economy can be quite a challenge. But the general consensus is the centrally planned economy is ill. Over the years, industrial and power output has suffered as resources were channeled towards the military built-up. Many of its infrastructures are said to be beyond repair. And it also has to deal with the wrath of Mother Nature annually.
In a country like DPRK, economically it's going to be very tough and challenging for them. This also was what we saw on the ground, because every year they are hit either by famine or floods.
Symbolic to some extent and problematic at most times, the Kaesong Industrial Complex in North Korea offers an opportunity for the two Koreas to cooperate in win-win activities. The park hosts more than 100 small and medium-sized companies from the south, and they employ more than 50,000 North Korean workers. Opening the industrial park to foreign companies would go some way to leveling up the North Korean economy. The huge gap between the North and South Korean economies has been often cited as one of the reasons that would make reunification impractical or almost impossible, and a prime reason why most South Koreans reject the possibility of reunification. North Koreans, though, have different ideas about reunification.
I go to North Korea and I ask them, would you like to see a unified Korea? And they say, absolutely, yeah, we would. But to them, a unification means North Korea kind of taking over South Korea. And then obviously in South Korea, they think that's a very different thing. So unification, yes, but what does that mean? There are lots of different visions of that.
Certainly, reunification means different things to different people in different situations. After being separated for more than 6 decades, Koreans on both sides of the peninsula have accepted that they are now two peoples who once shared a common history and an ancient culture. Each has developed its own distinct identity and charted its own course for the future. The two might never be one again, but it doesn't mean they should be at war.